Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the library tour of Doom. This is a library tour I'm conducting of every book that I own, every book that I ever have owned, every ebook that I own, every ebook that I ever have owned, one book at a time. So I really shouldn't take days off, because as it is, it's going to outlast a lot of us. And today is Wednesday. That is New Comic Book Day, when comic book fans go to their LCS, their local comic shop, and see if anything is of interest. The new comics will be on a low shelf in an unlit corner way in the back of the second floor. The staff will openly laugh at you when you ask where it is. They are in the business of selling bobbleheads. They might have comics in their title, in the name of their company, but they'll openly laugh at you when you ask where the comics are, unless you have a really good staff. So some of you out there have really good local comic shop staffs. I would have such a staff, a wonderful staff. There's a comic book store here in Boston called Comicopia that I used to love to go to. There's just a fantastic group of people, and as is true with all the really good LCSs, they got pretty much everything, or could order it for that week, to come in that week if you were on the ball and knew ahead of time. And they were perfect. Back when the Open Letters Monthly post office box was in Kenmore Square, right near Fenway Park. I'm laughing because I can't imagine going back to that. But once upon a time, all the books that I got in the mail came to that post office box. So I had to go 2 or 3 times a week to that post office box, usually with a muscular teenager or more than one muscular teenager. And the staff there, I got to know them. They were wonderful. They would just bring out tubs and tubs of books. And I just had to lug them over to a side table and somehow manage to get them into tote bags and backpacks. That was fun in a way. It wasn't always fun when it was sleeting outside. I'm so glad that I get the books here instead. But in addition to that, there was lots of other things. There was a used bookstore relatively in the area, and Comicopia was right in the area. It was perfect for just getting errands done. Also, a walk-in branch of my bank with tellers was right there in the square, and that was invaluable. You wouldn't believe, for somebody who's so bad with money as I am, and we're not talking about large amounts of money anyway since I'm a writer, you wouldn't believe how many times I need to go into a bank and ask a Grandpa Simpson question in person. That was a great nexus, and that worked for a long time. But then I started getting books delivered to the door here. It just makes more sense. It's just so much better. Unless they go missing. I had one key package go missing recently. Actually, it went missing in early April. I just learned that it was delivered and just vanished, and that it breaks my heart. But that usually doesn't happen. The pandemic hit, so of course I wasn't going to any of the other places in that area, including Comicopia, which for all I know is still in business and is open for foot traffic again. For all I know, they are. I haven't gone to their website, because why would I? They would be the only thing in that area, in that part of Boston, I would go to. I would have to make the trek all the way out there, look at what they have, then turn around, wave goodbye, and make the trek all the way back. I don't tend to do that at all. Unfortunately, I haven't suffered, because Mark Richardson and his wonderful wife, he has a Deb, but he has a significantly better Deb than mine. A much improved model. They have been very kind in going to their LCS up there in Vermont, which has a great staff, according to them, and maybe picking up a thing or two here and there for me, which has been great. It means I haven't had to go cold turkey on new comics, even though I don't have a comic shop to go to at the moment, is what I'm saying. But nevertheless, I have comics I can talk about aplenty here. Not as many as I would have been able to talk about, because my long boxes, those of you who don't know comics won't be watching this anyway, but your long boxes are these longitudinal white cardboard boxes that are designed to fit standing comics. You just put the comics in standing up and you fill the whole thing. And like any comic book fan, I have a bunch of those. But they are currently buried in a closet that is closed and walled off. So I don't have any casual access to them at all. I would have to tear apart a room, lift up furniture, in order to open the door of that closet and see what's in those. I still have plenty of other comics. I thought I would do that for today's library tour of Doom. So I picked this one, a paperback of Secret Avengers, written by Ed Brubaker and drawn by the great Mike Deodato, who I think is is currently working now on a Marvel title called Savage Avengers, which had the lunatic idea of adding Conan the Barbarian to the Avengers. I don't know about that at all, but one way or another, I love his artwork, just love it. And this is the volume in paperback. The subtitle says the complete collection, but I know that's not true. I know that's not true. I'm assuming that subtitle refers to the run that was done by Brubaker and Deodato. It's not the complete run of the Secret Avengers. That has a longer run than this. And this is an odd volume. There are two main stories here. One involves an ancient evil artifact uncovered on Mars, and the other involves an ancient evil sorcerer who is trying to come back to life and dominate the world. They're sort of lumped together, but that's not what makes this odd. The underlying premise of Secret Avengers is a kind of covert Avengers team. A team of Avengers that don't just blast in, lasers flying. They're not high profile. They don't get parades down Main Street. They don't do press conferences or anything like that. They're made for covert actions, and that's kind of a good idea in the Marvel continuity. You wonder why every superhero isn't an Avenger. The Avengers get a generous stipend every month. You got to figure a lot of vigilantes would like that. And the only thing they have to surrender in order to get that stipend is a little bit of their own volition. The Avengers is the team, and the team has a leader. So you can't just go off half-cocked. You have missions that you go on. They're not dictated by the government, but they are dictated usually by Captain America. You start to wonder in a situation like that why every superhero wouldn't be an Avenger, except for the obvious cases where they shouldn't be vigilantes anyway. They should be in custody. But one way or another, I think that is the basic idea here, but it doesn't work much at all. In fact, it doesn't bear much scrutiny at all. First of all, if you're going to have a team of covert Avengers, I don't care what his costume is. You're not going to have Captain America as the leader of that team. I mean, is there any less conspicuous Avenger anywhere in the world than Captain America? Fans of the series might say, well, a covert Avengers team won't have Thor running around shouting these and thous and blasting through brick walls and whatnot. But this team has Valkyrie, who is also an immortal Asgardian warrior and who also blasts through walls and shouts out these and thous. So, and that raises a question on its own. There are more questions raised by this series than answers. First of all, it's discount Avengers. Even Captain America, right, is not Captain America in this issue. He's Steve Rogers, Agent America, or whatever he was called in this incarnation. He doesn't have the mask. He doesn't have the A. He doesn't have the metal shield. He has an energy shield. He's a discount version of Captain America. You have Nova, who's sort of a discount Green Lantern, a part of Marvel's rip-off idea of the Green Lantern Corps. You have Valkyrie herself. I am a big fan of this character. I've always thought that she was underutilized in Marvel Comics. She's an Asgardian warrior. She is more proficient and more powerful than most average Asgardian warriors. I believe that the greatest book ever written, the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, the deluxe edition, which exists now in a full-color hardcover omnibus edition that I don't yet have. I still don't have it. I consult my crappy paperbacks all the time, but I still don't have that hardcover, only for the dumbest reason imaginable, because it's a little bit expensive. That is so stupid. I should have that by now. It is a perfect example of an expense on a book that I know will recoup itself. I know I will use it. But nevertheless, if I recall correctly, Valkyrie's strength level is around 40 or 45 tons. So in other words, 4 times stronger than Spider-Man. And stronger than an average Asgardian. She's also tougher. She has thousands of years of combat experience. And as Brubaker makes clear in this issue, in these issues here, he makes it clear without really drum beating on it, she's also magical. She is an inherently magical being. When the team goes to Mars, they need protective gear and helmets to give them air, and Valkyrie doesn't. She's not wearing any of that. She just goes to Mars on her own. And so on and so forth. But you have Black Widow. I know that she's a worldwide name now because of the fame of the Avengers movies, but She's an acrobat who's good with guns. She's not a heavy-duty Avenger. You have the Beast. That is the Beast. He is an X-Man. He's even wearing an X on the cover. He was at one point, had a brief tour as a member of the Avengers, but he is a discount Avenger by any means. You have Ant-Man. Only it's not Hank Pym, one of the founders of the Avengers. And it's not Scott Lang, who is the Ant-Man of the movies, played by what's his name, Paul Rudd. Instead, it's a knockoff Ant-Man. It's a third character playing Ant-Man, and obviously raising the question of why you would even bother. Why would you bother with somebody who's largely untrained and isn't even sure he wants to be part of the team? If anybody can use the Pym particle equipment to shrink down, why doesn't Steve Rogers do it? Why does he need to get this guy involved? You also have, you can barely make him out here, War Machine, who's a discount Iron Man. It's a discount Avengers. In addition to which, you have Moon Knight. I don't know, are you going to be able to see him now? Well, yeah, that's him on the back. That's Moon Knight. Extremely ill-defined character that somehow has a small fanatical fan base, kind of a Batman ripoff, whose one claim to being interesting in Marvel Comics is that he had psychological problems, deep-seated, schizoid psychological problems. Doesn't appear to have them in this series. They take away the one interesting thing. He should be the last person on Earth that Steve Rogers will recruit to rely on in team activity. Instead, he's here and doesn't really seem to have any problems one way or another. Also, in the character past of Rhodey, War Machine, there's all sorts of stuff that would make him the last person Captain America would recruit, but he recruits him anyway. And what about the Beast? Isn't he an X-Men? And what about Valkyrie? A question that, in Brubaker's defense, is not much dealt with anywhere else in comics either. Valkyrie was a long-standing member of a team called the Defenders through many incarnations. Still amazes me that the Defenders don't have a book of their own right now. At least I don't think they do. But one way or another, what is Valkyrie's relationship to Thor? He is the son of Odin, the king of Asgard, but the old Stan Lee and Jack Kirby run of Thor made it pretty clear the Asgardians don't just owe fealty to Odin, they also worship him. At the even to remove that, at the very least, so Valkyrie is the employee of Thor, right? She would call him Lord Thor. She certainly would not be insubordinate to him, and yet that's never addressed. It's never. No one ever seems to ask her, "What's your relationship to Thor?" And also, Valkyrie is an Asgardian. She's not like Thor. Thor is, is incredibly strong. He has the mystical hammer and all that sort of stuff. Valkyrie is just an Asgardian warrior. Asgardians are much stronger than humans. They are much tougher than humans. But other than that, Val isn't anything all that special. Why would she be adventuring on Earth? And if she is, why wouldn't a whole bunch of Asgardians be adventuring on Earth? They love adventure. Why wouldn't a whole bunch of them have made the decision to be part of the Avengers? With basically unbeatable superpowers. In this team of secret Avengers, Valkyrie is almost the most powerful person. I think you can make a case that she is. Why wouldn't there be 10 of them? If there are thousands and thousands of Asgardians, why wouldn't the Warriors 3, for instance? Why wouldn't Fandral, Hogan, and Volstagg, why wouldn't they be Avengers just all the time, not every once in a great while? One way or another, the first adventure is a MacGuffin chase on Mars that at least gives Brubaker the opportunity to make an obvious decision, which is to get rid of Nova. This is just a boring character. Every attempt that Marvel's ever made to make this character take off and be interesting has failed. There is no way to do it. It is a totally derivative character. I have often thought, a kind of heretical thought, because I bought the first issue of Nova when it came out in the 1970s, I think. And I thought, okay, well, this is kind of boring. This is obviously heavily influenced by Stan Lee. This is an attempt to just recreate Spider-Man, only for a higher powered, more cosmic era of comic book writing, but it's not interesting at all. And I've often had the heretical thought, in the fourth issue of that original run of Nova, he goes up against a mind-controlled Thor. The typical joke, in fact, John Byrne makes fun of it in his run on She-Hulk, is that in an early issue of some new character's run, in order to bolster sales and lock in fans, you have to have that character meet Spider-Man. And the sort of broader interpretation of that is at some point in one of the early issues, before the issue 5, the new character has to fight another established Marvel character. Even Jack Kirby did that with the Eternals. lugging in what seemed to be a fight between his main character and the Hulk. And I've often had the heretical thought that the best possible storyline for Nova would have been that he gets to issue 4. He fights a mind-controlled Thor. The mind-controlled Thor kills him easily, as Thor could easily do. And the rest of the next 6 or 7 issues is the Marvel Universe coming to terms with that. The Avengers step in, the Nova Corps steps in to try and get Thor back into his right mind. Thor is grief-stricken. Thor makes amends. We all gather at the gravesite of Richie Rider, and that's it. That's it for Nova. The Nova Corps goes elsewhere. They take their equipment with them, and that is the story. Oh, remember that time there was a boring teenage superhero that Thor beat to pudding when his mind was controlled? There would be a cautionary tale in the Marvel Universe. Better be careful when Thor's mind is controlled. But no one would think about Nova at all. Instead, he's still kicking around, and he's still every bit as boring as he ever was. And at least that first storyline on Mars gives Mike Deodato a chance to do some fantastic artwork, just incredible stuff. But it also gives Ed Brubaker a chance to drop Nova like a hot brick, and he does. In time to move into the second storyline, which involves the character Shang Chi. You may have he was briefly Marvel flirted with the whole kung fu fad of the 1970s, and he was one of the characters that they invented for that purpose, and Iron Fist and Sons of the Tiger and a whole bunch of other stuff. Shang-Chi is also incredibly boring. He has no personality. He's just a kung fu fighter, that's all. He should be as pointless, as irrelevant, as on the sidelines as Black Widow, in a world of characters who can lift a semi-truck over their head without any trouble. But nevertheless, Marvel keeps integrating him into their superhero line. And you may know the name because he not only has a first issue coming out today, Marvel is relaunching him with his own series. I was going to say, don't ask me why, but I actually know the reason why. Because he is also going to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe Stage 4. He is going to have a movie of his own. I believe that movie is probably going to flop really hard. But the corporate suits that own Marvel must have said, do we still make comic books? We still make the funny books for the kids? Okay, well, we're going to want to tie in this new Shang-Chi movie to the funny book. And only to be told, well, sir, he doesn't currently have his own comic book. The directive almost certainly came down on high to Marvel Comics saying, get this guy in his own comic in time for the movie. So that may be where you know the name, but he is the star of the second story in this collection. And that story itself is a problem. First of all, Shang-Chi is knocked unconscious, captured, held hostage, tortured, beaten throughout the whole thing. He barely gets a single lick in on any foe, even an anonymous thug with a gun. He barely does anything in his own storyline except act as a hostage. But the other problem, though, the bigger problem, is that Shang-Chi was conceived in a way that is no longer acceptable in the 21st century. He was conceived as the son of Fu Manchu, an old Sax Rohmer character who is just like so totes canceled in the 21st century as one of the ultimate examples of the yellow peril. Marvel Comics has a stable of long storied villains that they can't use anymore except in an ironic or fourth wall breaking way, like the Yellow Claw, who will never appear in a comic book again, who was a Captain America villain, or the Mandarin, who was an Iron Man villain and who had a brief and very knowing fourth wall breaking appearance in an Iron Man movie, but could never be used in his own right anymore, even though the character's basic concept is fascinating. One way or another, Marvel can't use those anymore, and by the same token, they can't use Fu Manchu anymore, which kind of cuts Shang-Chi adrift, right? And as a result, this second plot line just goes on and on and on, showing us a character who is obviously a decomposing corpse of Fu Manchu without ever naming him. It's just, all throughout those issues in this collection, we keep getting reference after reference after reference to Shang-Chi's father. Like we're supposed to know him. Like, we're all working down at the textiles plant and we know who Shang-Chi's father is. It's ridiculous. I don't know. It underscores how the kind of dog crap that Ed Brubaker had to work with here. These are the sort of the dregs of what you can do with a Marvel comic that he was either told or asked, see if you can do something with this stuff. You can, fine. If not, nobody's going to care about a third-string Ant-Man. Nobody cares what War Machine is up to today. No one has ever been interested in Nova. So, you take a chance with it and roll with it. We'll give you a couple of big names to work with, but other than that, you're on your own. Shang Chi is a very good example of that, as is his father, who, name to be determined. But that second arc in this collection did have a couple of interesting things that Brubaker does a lot with. One of them, they're actually very much the same. They are very much the same thing. One of them is an old ally of Captain America called the Prince of Orphans. Let me get you a good Mike Deodato shot of the Prince of Orphans. And one of the interesting things... Here he is again. It's Dad. there's Dad. One of the interesting things about the Prince of Orphans is that we get very little in the way of exposition. He just shows up. He is an old ally of Steve Rogers, of Captain America in World War II. Yeah, there he is. Prince of Orphans. He appears in a green mist. He appears unkillable. At one point, he is stabbed right through the midsection. And Shang-Chi says, you're injured, as he's pulling out the sword from his own midsection. And he says, no such luck. So maybe he's immortal. Maybe he wants to die. One way or another, he is in here as a kind of throwback to... he says... Steve Rogers says that they had some missions during World War II with the Prince of Orphans, who is never explained. He's never given any kind of heavy exposition dumping here. He's just one of the good guys. And he is mirrored by one of the bad guys in this series. Another character, let me get you a good visual of him, named John Steele, who we are told in this is a great coloring job. We are told his backstory in flashbacks, and the flashbacks are signaled by a different color palette, which is really a good decision. See that? You go from a full page color spread like that. There is Steve Rogers with the signature Mike Deodato 12-pack. You get a page like that, but when Captain America is remembering the war, when he's remembering knowing John Steele in the war, notice everything turns to sepia. It's a good way to signal a flashback. And we are told Captain America says he was bulletproof. He was much stronger than Captain America. There he is bending the nozzle of a tank. And that there were rumors that he was the first super soldier, and that he had gone all the way back to the Civil War, that he'd been in World War I and whatnot. He's a major villain in this second part, and handily beats Captain America in single combat. So if there's a super soldier serum running through him, it's a better version than the one running through Steve Rogers. Eventually, in the climax of the book, he has to fight Valkyrie. She is the team's big gun when War Machine is not around anyway. And she says to him, I hear you're some kind of super soldier, John Steele, so this should be fun. And she is relishing the fight, as an Asgardian would. She relishes the fight. And she is handling him. They are duking it out. She is obviously at least as strong as he is. But they don't have time to waste with her testing his mettle. So she decides to end things and stabs him with her sword. And he is stunned. He's bulletproof. That shouldn't be possible. That is a great reaction. He is stunned that she's able to wound him. But of course her sword is made in Asgard. It's an enchanted weapon. She never has any doubt that that's of course going to disembowel him. And that is largely it. There's a follow-up story here and a backup story from one of these issues that is poorly drawn, so I didn't pay it much attention. And the reason that I've held on to this when I have my issues with it is that it's an idea that has potential. There's a lot that I don't understand. I don't understand. There's a lot that I do understand, yes, for corporate business reasons. But in terms of just imagining for a minute that you could do whatever you want with whatever character you want, I don't understand why this wouldn't be Hank Pym as Ant-Man. I don't understand why, for instance, War Machine wouldn't have a stealth mode if the whole point here is that you're being clandestine. I don't understand why you would invite an Asgardian to the party at all. They're sword-wielding, shouting warriors. I don't know why you would do that. Marvel Comics has plenty of clandestine heavy hitters. You could use one of those. I don't understand why the Beast would be able to get time off from the X-Men. I guess maybe if his adventures are, here and there rather than regular. One way or another, I like the basic idea. I think the Avengers should have a covert strike force, something that doesn't make headlines and work from a mansion on the Upper West Side. So I kind of like the idea, and of course I love Mike Diodaro's artwork. But I don't know. I don't know that I would buy the subsequent. I don't know if there's been a collection of Secret Avengers that includes both this and everything else. One of those big $150 hardcover omnibus editions. I don't know that there ever has been. I know that there were more Secret Avenger issues in which I believe something very good, very dramatically useful and interesting is done with this Ant-Man, if I remember correctly. But if such a collection exists, I don't have it, and I don't think I've ever seen it. The collections that came out today in New Comic Book Day, there were two that caught my attention. One was a new Epic collection. Marvel Comics does full-color paperback Epic collections. You might have seen, if you watch Michael K. Vaughn's channel, when he does comic book videos, he stands in front of what it has to be the biggest Epic collection that I have ever seen. He has tons of them. I just have one little shelf of them. But for me, it's not so much the brand. For me, I really have to like what is reprinted. Maybe he does too and just likes more than I do. But one way or another, there is a new Epic collection today. It's the Avengers. A traitor shall lurk among them. With a classic John Romita cover on the front of the Epic collection that reprints issues that span the end of Roy Thomas's run writing the book. So issue number 100, the Avengers going to Olympus. The selling point that he had for issue number 100 of the Avengers is that he was going to bring in every character who had ever been an Avenger, which caused fans at the time that it came out to go nuts because it meant the Hulk, who was an original member of the team but had long since gone. Fans went crazy about that. And it happened. Barry Windsor Smith artwork. Barry Windsor Smith is probably the least inclined artist for a big group book, especially a major issue that's going to have tons of characters. He's not well suited for that. It's not his art style. But Roy Thomas was sort of leaving the book, and Steve Englehart was joining the book then. Now, Roy Thomas was the Kree-Skrull War. That was the storyline that just was incredible when he did a lot of good issues for the Avengers, but that's what he's kind of known for. And then you have the transition period, and then you get Steve Englehart, who... oh wait, have I got that wrong? I might have that wrong. One way or another. Roy Thomas was kind of famous for taking over the book from Stan Lee, whereas Steve Englehart, the thing that I remember him most for is a love quadrangle, where he has two couples that start to cross-pollinate. You have the Swordsman and Mantis, who are in love, but Swordsman is kind of a sad sack. He's ultimately pathetic. And Mantis starts to fall in love with Vision, who is in love with the Scarlet Witch, and she starts to notice. And this Epic collection doesn't have that storyline, which actually, well, they face Thanos later on, but that's going to be in some other Epic collection. This only has the beginning of that. I believe this Epic collection ends with the issue where the Swordsman comes back and Mantis is introduced. I believe that's the case. When Mantis is introduced, she and Scarlet Witch are friends. And Swordsman has a long and checkered history with the Avengers, mostly as a traitor to them. So when he tells them that he wants to rejoin the team and turn over a new leaf, they don't believe him. They mostly don't believe him. They make sure that he has a probation officer, basically, and that probation officer is Thor. And one of the most interesting things about that issue, when the Swordsman returns, is that we are actually shown, Bob Brown illustrations, we are told and shown that Thor and the Swordsman had adventures with a giant robot, with what looks like giant trees, giant evil animated trees or whatnot, and who knows how many others. We're told that it went on for a while, that Swordsman was with Thor having these adventures. But we're not told anything about the adventures. It seems pretty clear from that issue that the Avengers, the rest of the team, are not involved. I would love that. As a miniseries, I would love to read that. You couldn't find two Avengers less like each other than Swordsman and Thor, and yet we are told that Swordsman acquits himself very well in those adventures. Thor is impressed with him when they're over. I'd like to see those adventures instead of just seeing being told about them and getting little bits and pieces. That was one collection. was an Avengers Epic Collection. The more I thought about it, the more I thought the Epic Collections are not cheap. They're like $40. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought there aren't enough issues in this transition periods are notoriously weak, and there aren't enough issues in this transition period that I really like to warrant getting this Epic Collection at full price, when in a year I'll be able to get it for half that price, at any number of remainder places online. So that was one collection. The other collection that comes out in a very overpriced big hardcover is a collection of Kazar, the Marvel Comics ripoff of Tarzan that Stan Lee invented, an English aristocrat who becomes a loincloth clad savage. And the difference being that instead of, a cheetah, the chimp, Kazar has a pet saber-toothed tiger named Zabu, and they have adventures together. And the character was always cheesy and a little embarrassing, and also has no superpowers. So, again, you're faced with the same problem with Shang Chi or the Black Widow or whoever, which is, what are you going to do if you team up Kazar with Spider-Man or the Thing? What's he going to do? Crochet off in a corner, one way or another. He had his own book for a while. It was guest starred in the X-Men and whatnot, and a couple of team-up books. But nobody ever thought anything about him being a headliner until this reissue. The issues that are reissued here with Brent Anderson artwork. I remember when I got that first issue and thought, oh, this is strange. It's really good, but it's not Kazar at all. You have not retrofitted the character's origin story, but you are essentially writing a different character. There's one point, I can't remember if it's in issue 1 or issue 2, where Kazar tells an elaborate dead parrot joke in a very cynical, knowing nod to the villain and to what's going on in the storyline. And somebody actually wrote in, and in this case it wasn't me, somebody wrote in and said, well, this was a really good issue, but since when does Kazar tell jokes? And many fans echoed that question. We don't know who this is, in other words. These issues are really good, but we don't know who this is. The series was really good. It was really interesting. The Kazar character bore no resemblance to any previous incarnation, but he was really interesting. And Shanna, the She-Devil, another jungle ripoff character that Marvel brought in, was done really well. Their relationship was done really well. And some of those issues are just terrific. But again, the omnibus is murderously expensive. It's like $130 for a thing that is never going to be something that I consult all the time, because Kazar doesn't have superpowers. So I might find his comic interesting, but I'm not going to consult it all the time. Whereas the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, the deluxe edition, has a full-color hardcover omnibus that I haven't got, even though I know I would consult it all the time. Those were the only two real collections of interest to me. The Marvel Masterworks this time around is Brother Voodoo, a character from the 70s that has some interesting things in his origin story. A character whose brother is killed, and then the ghost of the spirit of his brother inhabits his body. And he learns all sorts of voodoo-related mystical abilities. He can teleport, and because his brother's spirit lurks in his body, he has twice the strength of a normal man. Brother Voodoo is a very interesting character, but I remember a lot of those early issues being just terrible, just terrible. The initial appearance, I think, had artwork by Gene Colan and was terrific. But then that was in that original appearance by Brother Voodoo. I want to say it was in some sort of showcase comic book. He didn't get his own first issue until after that. And the actual run of his comic book is included in this Marvel Masterworks volume, and I don't remember those issues being very good. I had a lot of them. So I wasn't really all that tempted by any of the collected volumes out this week. We'll see if that is true next week. I usually am tempted by collections rather than individual issues, which means I'm usually out of luck when it comes to the LCS up in Vermont. This is one thing to ask Deb Richardson to go into the shop and maybe pick up an extra copy of the Legion of Superheroes for $3. It's a very different thing for her to say, oh, and by the way, hon, could you pop in and get a $150 hardcover for me? I think my parking space at Mark's library would be revoked if I did that. So I'm not going to do that, and I wasn't really tempted. We'll have to see if anything tempts me next week. But look at the length of this video. Good Lord, you get me talking about comics. I'm going to wrap this up. I will carefully label the video so that if you're not interested in comics, you won't stumble around. So I'll wrap this up. That is your Wednesday comics and also your library tour of Doom. At some point in the distant past, we were talking about the library tour of Doom. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.